to episode 120 of Closer Mentality. I'm your host, Gily Meir. July is Disability Pride Month, and I have a wonderful story today to kick off this month. Have you heard of the Deaflympics? Athletes and coaches alike joke that it's the best event no one's ever heard of. The Deaflympics, a division of the International Paralympic Committee, operates as the second oldest international multi-sport event in the world. The first Deaflympics was held in Paris, France during the summer of 1924. Following the success of the 1924 Summer Games, the International Committee of Sports for the Deaf was founded. ICSD operates a system of sports and activities across the world, aimed at including deaf individuals in practices and games. In the same way that the International Olympic Committee oversees the Olympic proceedings, the ICSD acts as the governing body for the Deaflympics. Since 1924, the ICSD has organized 24 summer and 18 winter Deaflympics. Summer athletes compete in athletics, badminton, basketball, beach volleyball, bowling, cycling, football, handball, judo, karate, mountain bike, orienteering, shooting, swimming, table tennis, taekwondo, tennis, volleyball, and wrestling, while the winter Deaflympians compete in alpine skiing, chess, curling, ice hockey, cross-country skiing, futsal, and snowboarding. Though it may seem that the Deaflympics are simply a hearing-impaired athlete equivalent to the Olympic and Paralympic endeavors, today's guests explain that the Deaflympics is innately more complex than its hearing counterparts. Without further ado, welcome three-time volleyball Deaflympics medalist Dr. Becky Clark, and University of Western States professor and certified mental performance consultant Dr. Gily Meir. Though the Deaflympics recently celebrated 100 years, Drs. Clark and Meir saw a chasm of communication related to the support staff that modern deaf athletes are armed with. Whether it was communication breakdowns between 300 plus sign languages, or simply a lapse in the support staffers available, the mental health of deaf athletes has been nearly entirely overlooked. Dr. Clark, who became legally deaf at age 13 after years of physical and sexual abuse from a trusted adult, found sport as an escape. She wore hearing aids in college while suiting up for legendary University of Tennessee head coach Pat Summitt's Lady Vols. As her hearing worsened, Dr. Clark started learning sign language in order to communicate with teammates and coaching staff. She was joined on her interview by ASL interpreter Asia, who worked closely with Dr. Clark.
Since I was 13 and 14 years old, did not have the opportunity to have communication access. For the most part is funding and communication access and understanding cultural differences and similarities. Especially for the deaf community, we are like stuck in the middle between disability, disabled, and non-disabled, able-bodied. It's one or the other, so the communication access doesn't really come in until later. That's what I have to fight for, making communication accessibility and accommodations, and many places will not. You know, it's so important to develop athletes from the time they're young. And I mean, many of the deaf athletes have that in deaf schools, but didn't have access to sport psychology professionals. I mean, I wasn't familiar with it because I was always I think most of us older athletes now, it's like no pain, no gain. I played basketball for the University of Tennessee, Pat Summitt, and she incorporated a lot of the sports like techniques. She was a tough one. She was one that got me involved. I needed mental health help because it was tough with pressure, and she opened the door for that for me. And so I'm trying to provide these services for deaf athletes around the U.S. and around the world too. I got hearing aids, still could hear until I got to college. I used to tease Pat Summitt, loved to scream. I lost my hearing because of that and that. One of those coaches, oh. But I learned sign language in college and and learn about the deaf culture and deaf Olympics, and the rest is history. But there's a variety of different types of deaf. I often have people tell me, "Oh, you're not deaf, you speak." I said, "I wasn't born deaf."
Dr. Clark had relinquished a scholarship to play at UCLA when her hearing began to waver. She opted for Knoxville, Tennessee, a spot on Summit's squad, and a degree in deaf education.
I had given up a 3-year scholarship to UCLA, and I realized, deaf, how am I going to do this? How am I, I don't know. I don't know. Someone said, "Oh, well, you can go and major in deaf education." My goal was not deaf education. It was pre-med, become a medical doctor. And all of this was just new to me. All of a sudden, it was like people were telling me, you can't, you can't, you can't. And that's a lot what we hear with deaf athletes and deaf people, or people with disabilities in general. How much you can't, then you can. So I arrived at Tennessee. I knew 3 months of, I'm originally from Tennessee. You hear a little bit of my Southern accent. When I sign it, I slow down, stutters my Southern voice. Um, when I arrived at Tennessee, I had interpreters in the classroom for the first time, had no clue what they were saying except for a few signs. And I was taught that it was not nice, this is a Southern thing, to stare at someone. Well, I had to look at the interpreter to understand. I could still hear a little bit from professor, but still didn't understand. So I was like caught in the middle. So I gave up the scholarship at UCLA, walked on at Tennessee, and they provided an interpreter. And I've never used an interpreter in any type of sport. I'm like, how does this work? She's down here by the time I sprinted down the other way, So I had to have the eyes behind my head too. So it was really difficult. And I didn't really understand the interpreter that much. So I made the team. Oh gosh, there was no interpreter anymore. I didn't know that I could fight for one. I didn't know how to use one. These are some of the things that we are learning or teaching the students too, how to use an interpreter. That's so important. You don't, include the interpreter as a person in. It's just communication access. You look at the person that you're talking to, not the interpreter. But that was a very difficult year for me in adjusting and adapting to different cultures and languages, and the way people outside my hearing world was no longer my hearing world. And I'm learning all about the oppression and just a lot what you can't get. So that's a lot of education we have to do also. As long as we have the communication, for the most part, that's helpful. But, it opens doors in that way.
Doctors Clark and Meir, both with athletic and psychology backgrounds, are intent on bringing sports psychology resources to national team members, effectively bridging the gap. Ahead of the Tokyo Deaflympics in November 2025, Team USA brokered a partnership with the University of Western States to supply comprehensive sports psychology services to national team members. It's the first of its kind in the United States.
And so now with the partnership with the University of Western States, I'm excited because it's the first time in the 100-year history of the Deaflympics. There will be the USA team will have a sports psych team, or we call it the USA Performance Psychology team. And we're really excited about it. And I'm hoping it becomes the model. We have 6 students, with 1 being an alternate. We'll take 5 of those students. We have 4 professionals and 3 interpreters.
When Dr. Meir joined the contingent preparing this partnership, she was struck by what she didn't know. The colloquialisms, the strategy, and the inherent roadblocks to success seemed like a new world.
Boy, did I learn this the hard way, with Becky and many interpreters laughing at me along the way. But it's the little things, like speaking about it. We don't speak, we communicate. because that's kind of or little phrases that we have, like, have you ever heard about it? No, I don't. And I think that was kind of my first step of starting to understand how much I do not understand, and starting to understand this really significant gap in communication, which in essence require any hard of hearing or deaf athlete to want to come to me, adjust their communication pattern and their preferred communication in order to receive services, as opposed to us saying, hold on, like, what is our role and how do we always talk about meeting our clients where they're at, but we're asking them to make probably one of the most difficult adjustments to make, which is in the preferred communication pattern. So I think that's kind of step one. And you were asking, and we kind of got to it, what's the value of that? Mental training is a key component of getting to those highest level of competition, and performance. And at some point, your physical training, your tactical training, it's reaching that limit, that stability in the high level. It comes from the mental training. If we're saying there is populations that don't get that type of training unless they lucked into a coach who gets a little bit more of that, then essentially we're saying your chances of getting to those spaces is very limited. And I think that's where Dr. Castillo, who is the director of the program, and I were kind of like, wait a minute. We all at UWS talk about one of our core values is diversity and inclusion and equity. So how do we actually do it? And from that came a huge commitment from us, first to acknowledge that we haven't been doing it. And second, to say, okay, if I were to work right now with athletes in Spain, I would need to figure out how to communicate effectively. I would need to learn Spanish. I would need to, do something different in the same space. We're in the US and yet we're not doing it. So the first commitment that came from us is we all need to learn ASL. And don't get me wrong, I don't excel at that, to put it mildly. And languages in general is something that don't come easy to me. English is my second language, and I'm, working on it with it. But that's the first step. If we want to show that, yes, we're truly want to meet you where you're at, and we're not going to demand of you to make all the adjustments, I need to show some level of commitment to communicating in your preferred language.
Dr. Clark said that the Deaflympics fly under the elite sports radar due to the athletes' classifications. Communication adjustments are not available for deaf athlete eligibility in the Olympics, yet they're too quote-unquote able-bodied for Paralympic competition, which requires physical disability classification. It's a catch-22, but Dr. Clark is proud that the athletes she works with have facilitated the space for themselves in elite sport.
Whether we don't fall into the disabled body physical category or classification, and we're not hearing, so we'd have to fight a lot about getting visibility. That is so important. But it's been around a long, long time, and I learned a lot too. My first games, I went to 3 Deaflympics, but in the sport of volleyball, because they didn't yet have women's basketball that first year that I played. They decided at the last minute they would, but I was already committed to the volleyball team. And it was really interesting in how I had to grow and communicate among my teammates, my deaf teammates, because there was some, variety of different types of communication were very helpful. If I didn't understand something, they'd push me in position. But it's sounding because you can't really communicate visually while you're playing. Verbally, yes. So we have like 1 or 2 songs, but it was really a learning process for me. So by the time I got to LA and 85 games, Deaflympics, where we won the gold, that was precious. I would say, you are now part of us. And that was a long 4 years learning curve for that matter. But I would never it changed the experience just because it's Deaflympics. It's really competitive.
why do we need Deaflympics game? Why isn't it part of the Paralympics, or why isn't it part? And then the obvious answer to that, because they're able-bodied. I was like, okay, so why aren't they part of the Olympics and we're making the necessary adjustments? And part of it is because most deaf athletes don't have access to the same level of training that hearing athletes have. You have to make adjustments, and usually those that can make it come from a pretty high socioeconomic status. You have to pay your way, you have
Sure.
to provide yourself with the communication. You have to essentially pay for the gap in communication. It's on the athlete, which enhances the gaps. And when you look at it and say, okay, so why not Paralympic and create a category for that? Well, because again, they're able bodied. You can solve it. Like, think about track. You can solve it pretty easily. You just need to have a light component or a visual component to start a race, as opposed to just a gun. And I think this is where the Deaf Sport Federation is really crucial, because their job is to advocate for that and to essentially say, look, these are practical manners that we can try to overcome the gaps, that we can encourage sport, which we know is crucial for mental health and well-being for everyone, and enhance activity in the population in the whole, and foster talent, which exists with non-hearing and hard of aid hearing athletes as well.
All right. In the Paralympics, if there is the primary disability for the Paralympics is physical disabilities. There are some hard of hearing and deaf. And in the past, one of the most outstanding swimmers for the Paralympics was Becky Myers, who's deaf with Usher syndrome, became blind. She qualified for 3 games, won many, many golds, and the ESPY awards for the best athlete and so on. But that third Olympics in Tokyo, they're not allowed. Well, there was the pandemic. They would not allow her personal person that needed to be, because she was deaf and blind. They said they had 5. The U.S. Team had 5 A's. That's not enough for a full Paralympic team. So she backed out. But the point is, with the Paralympics and the Deaflympics is, if the Paralympics have an athlete, you must meet 55 decibels loss, or that in your better ear, if that makes sense, or more. And you could qualify if there is a sport that would fit that in the Deaflympics. Now, for the deaf athletes could qualify if they had a physical disability too, similar to Becca. Because Becca was born deaf, later visually impairment, and that's how she qualified for the Paralympics. But anyway, so that was to sign an MOU. That was the start. But the big cost of being part of the Paralympic is that they were able-bodied, they had to provide interpreters, and it becomes the mini game. And the deaf sport world say, we cherish our games. We don't have to send only maybe 20 to 30 athletes when we have over 3 to 4,000 athletes from around the world.
The first Summer Games in 1924 welcomed 148 athletes from 9 countries. Nearly 100 years later, the Turkey 2017 Games saw 2,856 athletes from 97 countries competing in 18 different sports. The Games are growing rapidly, and the partnership between Team USA and the University of Western States makes history as the first of its kind for hearing-impaired athletes. Dr. Meir, tasked with sourcing sports psychology practitioners for the Tokyo Games team, admitted that the skill set required is difficult to find in a culture that oftentimes downplays and silences the disabled experience.
We know that as consultants, many times we're most effective when clients can relate to us and think that we can probably understand what their experience is, because we're sharing at least some of our identities and some of the experience that they may have. So that was definitely one key component. We wanted to make sure we're diverse and representing different background, different ethnicities, different genders, different everything. But I think that was almost like the second step. The first step is how good are you? And how good are you is really determined in terms of your ability to meet the client where they're at. We were definitely searching and hoping to get more members on the team that are fluent in ASL. Those are a very rare commodity to find. In fact, one of our team members, he's a UWS alum that we trained, and now he is one of the lead consultants in the team, which is extremely exciting. He just graduated with his doctorate. We're all like, yes.
Now there are two of us deaf sports psych. We have one CMPC certified mental performance consultant who is an athlete on the men's deaf soccer team. So maybe next time but there are three of us in the world.
So there are more challenges, logistical many times. Always, not always, but nearly always around communication. And it's definitely leaking into the performance domain. So you have to work with a hard of hearing or deaf athlete to help them figure out how to approach that. How do I approach it when I come into a competition venue and there is no interpreter, or I need to advocate for myself, and how frustrating it is, and essentially create a pre-performance plan, just like you would do to anything else that is around this issue. So it started to get us to shift in our understanding of what it is that we need to do and how do we approach it and how do we meet the needs of different athletes, but also different sports, different cultures, putting all of that together. The main component in all of the team members that we were look for is pure curiosity and the ability to recognize that they don't know. So we were looking for people who know that they know sports psych, know that they have something to offer, and have good level of faith and belief and confidence in that. And at the same time, they're happy to be wrong. They come in very curious, and they come in understanding that they don't understand. Those were essentially the people we were looking for when we were trying to build up the team. The hope is that we're building a system that is going to continue in future games as well, winter and summer. That's definitely a hope, to create a support system that is similar and different in how it needs to be to what is offered to all Olympians in the US.
Dr. Clark, who for years has been casually playing the role of sports psychologist to the deaf athletes she advocates for, said that she welcomes a whole team dedicated to that mission.
You know, it's been a struggle for these deaf athletes and coaches to access services, especially sports psych and mental health services, support in games and the kind of sport that all the other athletes, easily have. And the fact that it's happening, we should celebrate that. But we will never rest on our laurels. We'll keep going.
She said that this partnership signals a greater determination for equality in sport for disabled athletes.
This started with asking Dr. Costello, Dr. Meir, I said, why don't you come to the Deaf Games, to the Deaflympics, to get the experience? It'd be amazing, just amazing. So many sign languages, so many cultures, it's just very, very diverse. And see everything. And next thing I know, we're creating a course and setting up a team ourselves. And I'm thinking, I'm being hopeful. While there are other deaf and hard of hearing, I would say, students out there learning sports psych and mental health both, it's still not enough. It's still not enough. So I'm hoping that we create a service, a model for UWS that can be copied or replicated. I can't pronounce it. That's my deafness here. That can be shared with other universities that will continue on to, well, who knows. But this is our first time. USA Deaf Sport Federation first time too, and we're really excited. So like what we say, we're building the plane while we're flying it, and just get a lot of experience and a lot of grace with each other. What works and what doesn't work, and of course the big things like um, funding for outside of our actual cost of going, what we need, what can we provide. And I'm hoping that this grows even more. And we don't have to think about it 10 years down the road, that we do have opportunities to provide for those who don't have the opportunities. If that makes sense. But it's an exciting time. Everyone is in this partnership is exciting. USOPC, I met with them, the psychological service director last week or 2 weeks ago, and they're excited about it too, to provide mental health first aid for our team. So it's exciting. So we'll offer both. I think very important, since the Tokyo Games for the Olympics and Paralympics, mental health is very, very, very important in addition to the mental performances altogether. So it's an exciting time, and I'm ready to go. We've got a lot. Wonderful thing about UWS is they started with this course or this training. I'm going to call it training. It's a year-long training almost. Started in January. We started with the cultural training, language, ASL, learning, just learning. And now we're going into the applied part of it and of the training all the way to November. The games in Tokyo, that's the sign for Tokyo. Japan, November 15th through the 26th.
Dr. Meir had a slightly different experience while she's been assimilating into deaf culture.
Foolishly, I thought that we're going to come in and everyone's just going to be very excited. We're providing all of the services pro bono. It a great opportunity for all sides. I thought everyone is just going to be all over it. And what we have experienced, what I've experienced, which Becky's experienced for the last couple of decades, but it was a new one for me, is a real hesitation from the USA DSF as well as the athletes to kind of be like, wait a minute, you're coming in a team of 10 people, only 2 of you are part of our community, and you're going to tell us how to do things.
Right.
Which is, you can, in honesty and fairness, I am still trying to process the resistance, it's a little bit of a fear, a little bit of experience that have taught them that at the end of the day, they're probably the one who are going to need to make the accommodations on communication. And we come in with the best of intentions, and they can see that. And we're going to have to work very hard to win their trust and demonstrate that we are truly going to meet the communication demands of the athletes, that that's the center of everything at this point, and that it's going to be fairly offered to everyone. So one of the fears is, because so many of us are hearing, is that only oral deaf athletes are going to be able to come and receive our services. And they want to make sure that, it's equitable around for all of the athletes. So I think in these games, it's really about proof of concept, first and foremost, demonstrating that you can be hearing and be a true ally. And what does a true ally look like? I think that's going to be the center of these games and this experience, both from, like Dr. Clark said, we've been working very hard to educate ourselves, building a full curriculum, with meeting with people from the community, reading a lot, trying to get ourselves, it's really deaf culture 101 is kind of what we've been doing. And as we go through this and as we understand the experience, it's become very clear of, okay, at this point, we don't even know what to ask a lot of times. We don't understand what we don't understand. And I'll give you interesting examples. We wanted to do workshops that are open to the entire athletic body. So anyone who's interested can sign up. And the idea was to create both something that is tangible that they can take away, but also really to create a hook to get them to come to us for more services. That's the goal of it. And we started off and we said, okay, how do we run? Like, it's going to be all virtual. How do we run that Zoom? And then we say, okay, we probably need to do a survey in the beginning to understand what are the communication preferences. How do we even run this? Just writing that question of how would you prefer to communicate, it's a minefield that we were walking because we understand so little about the experience that we cannot even word it correctly. So we write up a question and then we send it to Becky and Skip, and they're looking at it like, let's try again. And going through all of these adjustments, recognizing that how we even choose to communicate and ask the question is not straightforward. So I think those are the pieces that are really, if I'm being very honest, we are learning how to be effective allies at this point. In addition to how we're finally getting into the steps of how to be effective consultants. So I think that's kind of the space that we're in at this point, and probably the main thing that we're going to focus on in these games is a proof of concept that we can do it, we can support, this can be effective. And we're constantly having in our back of our mind, okay, and how do we scale it up? And scaling it up, it's in the sense of, if we're going to meet the athletes in Japan, we're not going to be very effective. We have to meet them now and start working with them now to be effective. So how do we create a system where these services are accessible to the different NGOs, the different national governing bodies? And if we have a volleyball coach who's working with a deaf team, they know that this service exists, and it could be utilized even though we're hearing, even if we don't have someone who is communicating in ASL. So that's really, I think, the main goal that I see kind of moving forward is establishing that, raising awareness that there is such a thing as mental training, and you can have it too, even if it's not the same language, even if it's not offered regularly in your training spaces and all of that. I think that's really where we're at this point.
Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless of if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human in this world going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a positive way. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. This is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options just in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. If this sounds like something that could help you, there's a link in the show notes to get you started on your therapy journey. It's betterhelp.com/closer mentality. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. Because finding a therapist is a little like dating. If you don't really fit with the therapist matched with you, it's easy and free to switch therapists without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/closer mentality. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/closer mentality. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this channel. Did you know that you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libro FM, you can pick from more than 325,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there, you know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports your local community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to squeeze more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libro FM app while you do chores, walk the dog, or relax at home. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations from the people who know best, booksellers. Closer Mentality has partnered with Libro FM on a special offer. Through the link in the show notes, you can get 2 audiobooks on Libro FM for the price of 1. Offer only valid for new members in Canada and the US. Thanks to Libro FM for sponsoring this podcast.
They're like any other athlete on the world stage. How do you manage the pressure? What are the mental skills I need to get to that gold or medal or winning, to play the best I can? I'm going to put it that way. I would say outcome of a medal, but playing the best that I can possibly be and representing the USA. That's what excites him. Anything that can give him that edge. And the USA team will be the first deaf team who will have one in the Deaflympics. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on us. But I really, truly believe once that we've had the opportunity to introduce ourselves and what we're doing. Right now, we're working with the USA Deaf Federation, team director for the Deaf Games, the president, the board, and soon we'll start working with the athletes. When they realize the service that we offer, I think they're really going to run with it. With confidence, how to keep your confidence, how to manage your emotions, the focus. Gily, help me out. What else more we want? Also, and managing emotions in the mental health realm too. But go ahead, Gily.
Part of the biggest realization is the differences are not that different from any other Olympic athlete or high-level athlete. Everyone is going to have that dip in confidence. Mm-hmm. There is something extremely overwhelming about the huge stage, and how do you manage that? All of that. And in addition, there is more demands on the system. So there is a culture shock for many of the athletes who are going to participate, both all of a sudden being fully immersed in a deaf experience and games, but also, as Becky was saying before, I can sign, but I can't understand anything because there's 300 different sign languages, and very few people sign in the international sign language. So that gap in communication, that cultural shock that we anticipate for US athlete getting to Japan, which is a very different culture, is going to be there. And I think in general, what we think is likely going to be experienced is just a very heavy demand on the system, and being able to kind of refocus on what really matters right now. How do I put all of it aside? And again, true to all athletes, but with what I think is going to be, and again, I haven't been there yet to feel it, but what I anticipate is what resources do I have and how do I utilize them? From my experience, it's something that most athletes don't know how to do. And it's a lot more crucial because the logistical demands are higher. So everything is a little bit more complicated. It's not something you cannot do. And I am also confident that for many of them, it's going to be second nature because that's been their lived experience. But like Becky described, her first games, it's not going to be for all. And I think that's a really big piece that we're anticipating, that the spectrum is going to be really wide in terms of how foreign or familiar this experience is to them. And then how do you manage that and kind of stay in your lane of, okay, yes to all of this, and now I'm here to play a game and be the best that I can be and hopefully win. Of course, that's a big portion of it.
Dr. Clark is spending a portion of the time between now and November traveling the world on a sport diplomacy mission. She's been working closely with national governing bodies and embassies since the Nixon administration. Her focus has always been to shine a light on the deaf athlete experience, but more recently, the aim has expanded to feature mental health and sports psychology proof of concept.
I most recently was Indonesia. We had a few deaf athletes that were the youth athletes that were integrating our hearing team. They did not have communication access. I didn't have communication access at that point either. Really interesting. Anyway, but for the most part, the State Department or the sports diplomacy department always provide. Now, Asia has been my interpreter throughout the sports diplomacy career that I've had as a volunteer, more or less working with the Japanese culture there, knowing that the games are coming first time ever in Asia. So there's that, and kind of like preparing the way. The U.S. Embassy in Tokyo will be hosting a reception for all our USA athletes, coaches, and staff. So we're really excited about that. So we might be very visible for the first time in 100 years. So I remember we'd have some fun, but yes, we have a lot of the challenges, and we're learning as we grow what works and what, as we grow and as we go, what will work, what not work, and we have each other, and that we're aware of what we don't know. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to steal that one from Gily. Yeah, but seriously, it's an exciting time. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of moving pieces, but I'm seeing a lot more support from outside or from within our country itself, the U.S., in different capacities, which is exciting for us. So, and we're going to do the best that we can to prepare. And we're looking forward to working with the athletes now until November. We established that relationship and through the games.
Are you an athlete rehabbing from an injury? Are you a coach or athletic trainer seeking additional support for your injured athlete toolkits? KT Tape has exactly what you need. KT Tape is a rehabilitation tape that helps stabilize and compress sensitive areas of the body during exercise. Apply KT Tape to an area either in pain or in recovery, and feel the difference. KT Tape is comfortable, stable, and long-wearing. There's tape for all modes of action, from gentle, which is safe for easy activity and everyday use, to pro extreme, for athletes in moderate to high-impact exercise. KT Tape makes water-resistant tape as well for a more adaptable rehabilitation implementation. KT Tape caters to lifelong athletes and focuses on reducing muscle soreness for all users when worn during exercise and up to 48 hours post. Are you an athlete in need of prescription sports goggles or sunglasses? Today's final sponsor may have just the solution for you. A Sight for Sport Eyes was created when founder Shannon Knight saw a niche that was perpetually going unfulfilled. A Sight for Sport Eyes grew out of a need for education surrounding the impact of sport-related eye injuries and their lasting repercussions. A Sight for Sport Eyes runs like a regular optical practice, not an e-commerce store. Their goal is to give you the same high-quality service and name-brand lenses made by the best optical laboratories in the country, geared specifically for athletes and athletic use cases. If you need new lenses or frames, A Sight for Sport Eyes is the perfect place to get them. The links to BetterHelp.com, Libro FM, KT Tape, and A Sight for Sport Eyes are all in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode.
It's using sport or as an opening to discuss other issues, whether it's culture or things between the two countries or similar experiences, what's same and what's different. But we don't go in and say, hey, this is the way we do it, you must do it. It's an interchange, it's a friendship, and sport brings us close together. It's just a phenomenal opportunity. With China, I learned about some of their challenges. They learned about ours, and people didn't think the U.S. had any issues. Well, we have plenty. Our deaf athletes can't get the services they need, with sports psych or any others, or the communication and developing their physical skills, their sports skills, technical skills, and so on and so forth. And then we come up with how can we help each other. It's really a phenomenal phenomenal experience, and there's nothing like it. And all the work that I've done, you know, it's very special in serving my country that way. And I'm looking forward for our team, the whole USA team, Deaflympics, plus our sports psychology team, a performance team, put it that way, get that experience on sports diplomacy level too, with the embassy, the people that we meet, and just the connections, and all because sport brings us together. There's no language that's the barrier.
Between the diligent sport diplomacy work that Dr. Clark has been doing and Dr. Meir's sport performance consultancy team, the USA is primed for increased visibility this November.
Really, our main goal right now for these games and taking on all of these platforms is to get to the point that people are aware those games are happening. At the end of the day, deaf sport is not different from this. It's a business. You need to have consumers and spectators in order for funding to go. And I think that's the piece that is really going to elevate it and take it to the next level. So I want to have people interested in how did they do? What was the medal count? Something that Americans are pretty obsessed with. So kind of bringing that into attention and bringing the focus into that and getting to a point that it's not the best games that no one has ever heard of, but everyone knows what the Deaflympics is.
Additional links to learn about this partnership, the Deaflympics, and the University of Western States are all in the show notes. You can also watch this entire interview with visibility subtitles on the Closer Mentality Uncensored YouTube channel. I hope you've had a wonderful first week of Disability Pride Month. I want to say thank you to Drs. Clark and Meir, as well as Dr. Clark's interpreter Asia, for sharing this wonderful progress on episode 120 of Closer Mentality. As always, I'm your host, Julia Mellet. See you next week.